Okay, well, I'm very pleased to have with me today, via Skype, Susan Joy Rennison, who is the author of a book called Tuning the Diamonds, and also a physics and geophysics scientist. Susan, perhaps you could just give us a little bit of background about yourself before we start to launch into some of your far-ranging ideas that you've written about.
Okay. Well, it's interesting you call me a scientist. I basically have an honours degree in physics and geophysics, but I then moved into computing for maybe 10 years or something, and then I was offered the opportunity with my ex-husband to move from the UK to Italy to become an expatriate, and so from that time, it was about 1997, I've actually lived abroad from the UK. I'm very much a sort of, I'm a seeker of the truth, that's what I call myself, and I've spent most of my life reading and wanting to understand my reality. I'm quite a quiet person. I'm not a great social, networker or anything like that. I've spent a lot of time seeking, and I'm one of these people that, in the way that my mind works, I have to understand, I have to integrate. It's almost like I'll learn one thing and then it has to slot into what I already know. So this is who I am as a person. I don't give myself airs and graces. The only thing is, I think it's important that people know that I do have some academic qualifications, but primarily my main focus is the integration of science and metaphysics. And that's what I've spent my whole life doing, and trying to understand my reality. And that, to me, that is very important. And at the moment, things are so crazy with our reality, it's even more important.
Definitely.
Okay, is that enough?
No, that's perfect. I guess it's really great because you've still got that scientific rigour, that desire to really know the truth and to be able to test it. That's the essence of science, really. It's an ism, but it's a framework which gives us a ability to know more about our environment and our surroundings and who we are. And really, if it's done the right way, everyone has that scientific drive. It just needs to be activated in people.
Well, to me, I believe that many scientists are actually truth seekers too. And there's something about being a seeker of the truth, that you know that you're that kind of person. And it's interesting because I've come across scientists who will, the first thing they'll tell you about themselves is they're a seeker, and that is a mark of a seeker. It's so uppermost in your mind and in your thinking. It's one of the first things that they will tell you about themselves. This is what annoys me when I come across people who don't have very high levels of integrity, because they don't understand this urge and this need to understand the truth, or to seek the truth. So that's what I'm about. And I relate to scientists because ultimately a good scientist is looking for the truth.
Definitely.
They want to understand their reality, what reality is really about. So this is why you will come across scientists who will put everything on the line. They'll put their reputation on the line because they ultimately want to understand the truth, and they're not really that interested in fitting in with the status quo. Well, with the current paradigm. Yeah,
I mean, there's lots of issues embedded in that because we'll get onto some of those later, but just in brief, it seems to be that the whole paradigm of space weather and what that tells us about our universe is rapidly changing now, and a lot of your writings quite cleverly bring together a lot of disparate scientific evidence that's been sort of documented and verified, but it's not all put together into one big new paradigm, And just in regards to space weather, there's a quote that you use from NASA, I think, that says, "These discoveries about the outer fringe of our solar system come at a time when new NASA revelations are piled up so fast and so frequently that our paradigm is completely changing again and again without the general public even really being aware. It's a whole new ballgame in space."
Well, yeah, that's a great quote, that is. And for me, I could not have understood what was taking place without the work that's been done by people who call themselves electric universe theorists. And I'm very grateful because the whole understanding of plasma, of the universe being filled with particles that we can actually detect them, some of them that we can detect, and the fact that they are controlled by electric and magnetic fields. I couldn't have come to the conclusions that I've come to without that knowledge. And these people have been considered to be heretics. Cosmologists and astronomers have considered these people to be completely crazy. And yet now, with the whole issue of space weather, people who run satellite communication companies are not interested in gravity. They want to understand why these satellites are being zapped in space. The fact that they are as flows of charged particles in space. The satellites are basically being electrified or being zapped. They want to understand what's going on, what they can do to protect their satellites. They have no interest in old theories based on gravity.
Well, let's just take it from basics here. Sorry, Susan. What's the general definition of what is space weather?
Space weather is basically, that's a good definition. I mean, for me, it's just something I just accept. It's basically changing parameters, a changing solar wind, the interplanetary magnetic field. It's basically the change of the conditions in space. And very often rapid changes is what the problem is. So we basically have a bunch of satellites in space monitoring the conditions, monitoring how many charged particles are flowing through, what type of charged particles, the magnetic field, the strength of the magnetic field. All these parameters create an environment, and at the moment we have times where it's like a hurricane in space with just the volume of energy that's passing through in a very short space of time. So it's like weather, but it's really charged particles.
I guess it's no coincidence that the weather on Earth seems to be going so intensified and so chaotic at the moment, and it seems to be reflecting, the heavens above as well.
Well, the whole point is that NASA and the space agencies, world controllers, they've had this issue of wanting people to think that there is no connection between what's going on down on Earth and what's going on in the heavens. There seems to be a traditional view to separate the two, and that is now impossible with space weather. And I think it's because we've had cataclysms on this planet before, and it's been driven by events from space. But to create a stable society, the view is to just ignore any kind of interaction between space and our planet. And this involves the weather. Scientists have been saying for a very long time that earthquakes are caused by changes in the celestial environment. The whole thing with astrology, this sort of dismissal, is based on, because of course astrology is about these huge planets and their electromagnetic impact on this planet. The same thing with the moon as well. How changes in the positions of these huge bodies in space can actually have an impact on Earth. Even though there's been many, many studies and research by creditable scientists, the view has been just to ignore that. But it's getting to the stage now where we can't ignore it because, as I've said, the environment in space has completely changed. There's far more energy in space now. And so when you have these planetary alignments, it's much more obvious that something's going to happen, that we're going to have an earthquake. And it's much more likely to happen now.
So I guess we're all becoming aware then, or at least the scientists, that the Earth and the Sun are interconnected, and that they have a very dynamic relationship. I've got a quote from one of your writings, one of your PDFs, that says in June 2010, as NASA press release entitled "As the Sun Awakens, NASA Keeps a Wary Eye on Space Weather," opened with the unequivocal full statement, "Earth and space are about to come into contact in a way that's new to human history." This is Richard Fisher, the head of NASA's heliophysics division. He says, "I believe we're on the threshold of a new era in which space weather can be as influential in our daily lives as ordinary terrestrial weather. We take this very seriously indeed." So NASA and the top of the scientific food chain is really looking at the idea of space weather very, very, very seriously.
I was just amazed by that quote, because I felt like I was very much on my own and coming out with this whole concept that we hadn't really understood what the Mayan elders were trying to tell us. They were saying that we were entering a new period where where life on Earth is going to be dominated by the ether. They had their sort of esoteric understanding, and I felt that this was really more than just an esoteric idea. This was an actuality, that the energy that surrounds our planet and that actually penetrates the planet, this was actually going to change. I felt that space weather was the answer. The problem the Mayan elders have got is the fact that a lot of their knowledge has been lost. So they've just got bits and pieces of information that they've retained over thousands of years. They don't have everything. What I tried to do in my analysis is to pull information in from many different sources. So there's information from Vedic seers, the Mayan elders, there's metaphysical information that's coming through the metaphysical community today, there's esoteric information that's been retained in monuments. I tried to put that all together, and as far as I was concerned, I felt the messages were all warning us about a massive change to our reality, and this was space weather. So,
well, Susan, let's look at some of the things that you mentioned in your book, just so I can sort of have a linear flow here. You mentioned the things, and you released a PDF in June this year as well. It's called Planetary Challenges and Evolution. Really, that was sort of instigated by some of the Obama administration and what they were doing with metaphysics community across the world and asking for their input. But it's not just... See, I'm trying to give a context here for our listeners. Space weather is a dominant, dynamic concern for, I guess, the power elites as well as the scientific intelligentsia around the planet. The Obama administration has been warned that there could be massive power surges that could affect the grids, the energy grids. They're talking now about cutting power, very dramatically, to protect it from surges, from solar flares. Lloyd's of London released an insurance report in November 2010 warning of the dangers of space weather. The International Space Station is monitoring very closely now, cosmic radiation and things up there. There's been, as you say in your writing, zombie satellites produced from solar flares. It just seems that so much is going on. There's so many, established, groups that are aware of the implications. It's something that's really, really dominant and in our faces on the planet at the moment.
Well, when I wrote my book, to me, I felt I was late to the party, because space scientists were just so shocked by the massive geomagnetic storms that we had in 1989. But from the metaphysical point of view, that was when we told there was massive change taking place on this planet. So I knew 1989 was a massive marker. But when I published in 2006, I just felt very, very alone. To me, it was absolutely obvious. I was spending a huge amount of time researching, reading what the military had to say, what communication scientists had to say. They were absolutely adamant that this was really important and they had to get to grips with this, and yet nobody else seemed to be aware of just how serious this was. I integrated the information that I'd picked up over the years from reading and my own personal research. I integrated it and did my book. Okay, the book it's not perfect because I did it on my own and I had no input from anybody else. But I did my best trying to integrate the information, and I had very little support from anybody. And it's still the same way. People don't seem to be that interested in reality. And it sounds harsh, but that's my conclusion that I've come to.
Oh, I think you're right. I know what you mean. Yeah.
And so basically, I have been amazed by what's happened. 5 years later, after I published my book, and I've had very little support in those 5 years, we have the UK and the US governments saying, okay, we think that things could get so bad that we're going to take the decision to actually pull down the grids before they're destroyed.
And that's huge. Now, that's just huge. That's like civilization coming to a stop for the time they put the grids down.
Exactly. It's absolutely incredible. I couldn't believe it because there's a film called, it's actually a documentary drama called Perfect Disaster Solar Storm.
Oh, wow.
And it's produced by the Discovery Channel. And they do it in like a drama style. And one of the things they tell you is about space weather and how you can tell that space weather's getting worse. And they talk about satellites crashing mysteriously, and they talk about phone networks just disappearing. Like a month ago in Norway, they had terrible problems with their mobile networks there. So it's actually quite interesting. This was a documentary drama, and yet exactly the same thing is happening. And in this documentary drama, they talk about the decision to literally just switch off the grids. Now, I've got issues here because in 1989, when they had this a massive geomagnetic storm that knocked out the transformers in Quebec, Canada, it took 90 seconds from when the storm hit the planet to when the transformer was fried. So I don't know what kind of warning that I don't know what criteria they're going to be using, what procedures they're going to be using for this decision to actually just turn the switch. I mean, you've got to think about hospitals, you've got to think about uses that are critical, you've got to think about nuclear power plants and things like that. Well, you can't just switch off. I'm at the moment, I'm still in shock because this is quite a recent announcement, and I'm thinking I'd like to know what the procedures are going to be for this. It's
a bit of a catch-22, isn't it? I mean, basically civilization comes to it's like the brownouts in World War II or the blackouts, but it's like on such a huge scale with a modern technological civilization, everything goes offline, and whether that's for 5 minutes or 10 minutes, the flow-through effect would ripple through, and then you get this equal and opposite reaction with the populace who just get it. If it's a false alarm, well, they're going to get a bit jacked off at that, like the whole civilization going offline.
Well, okay, I mean, there's a whole story behind this. At the moment, space weather forecasting is considered to be in its infancy. That's another way of saying they don't know what they're doing, right? It's very hit and miss at the moment. It's very poor. To be able to predict having solar flares, X-rated solar flares, being able to predict the coronal mass ejection, it's very, very poor level of predictions at the moment. So what happened, we now have a lot of new satellites in space, literally monitoring the sun. They're picking up information, terabytes of information, and sending it back. But the thing is, the sun keeps doing new things. And that's a bit of an issue because they can't get to grips with it when the sun keeps doing something different. And then, so what's happening is you've got satellites huddled around the sun 93 million miles away. That's about 150 million kilometres away. You have a blast. You normally have like a solar flare. The energy from that, the electromagnetic energy will arrive on the Earth at the speed of light. That's about 8 minutes, 30 seconds. And there's nothing you can do about that. It's just too fast. Okay? Then you have like the high-speed radiation particles that might arrive an hour later. And what's happening is we have satellites sitting at L1, Lagrange point 1, and that's a point in space where there's no gravity, and there's just a bunch of satellites there just floating in space, just watching the sun. And the most important one is ACE, the ACE satellite. Now, the thing with the ACE satellite is it's actually old. It's well past its sell-by date, and yet of all the satellites we have in space, and there's something like 13,000 satellites in space, we only have like 2 or 3, or maybe a handful of satellites that are being used for space weather. And the most important one is the ACE satellite, and it's due to be replaced, and that there's no replacement. It needs to be replaced. So when the US and the UK government say that we're going to switch the grids off, I'm thinking to myself, well, you're making some big assumptions here that you've actually got some data to make that decision on. Because that ACE satellite could die at any point, basically. And it's the whole thing is quite shocking, actually.
Yeah. Isn't it also that the amount of space, satellite materials we have up in space now is more than ever before, and that in the region they're in, they're all very vulnerable to solar flares and to electromagnetic activity?
Well, I was quite surprised because when I did my presentation in Holland, I did a little bit more work. I was actually looking for hard information. I don't just make things up. I work very, very hard looking for information. And I found it was a consultant for the Royal Air Force, and he'd put out a very nice document. It was just like a presentation, but put in a PDF. And in 2003, when we had some huge storms, I think about a third of the military satellites lost some kind of functionality. It's about a third. I mean, it was just, I couldn't believe it. It was really, I think a third is a lot. I mean, so it's serious. Now, from my point of view, I, as well as having a sort of scientific bent and wanting to integrate information, I also have the metaphysical side to me. I actually use both sides of my brain, and this is why I have difficulties, because people don't really understand that. In the metaphysical world, we were given clear messages saying that this was the amount of energies arriving on the planet were going to dramatically increase. I mean, huge, like an exponential increase of energies. So when I came across space weather, I thought, oh my goodness, it's going to get really bad. And that's exactly what's happened.
So what is happening now? From your writings, there's like the amount of cosmic rays coming in more than the whole 20th century, which was a weak time. But the magnetic field is weakening at the same time around the Earth as the cosmic rays are coming in. What's happening? Sort of give us some of the brief rundowns of the big players out there in space weather at the moment.
When you say, I mean, what do you mean? I don't quite understand what you mean. I mean, cosmic rays were at an all-time high, but even in the solar minimum time, that's the number of cosmic rays coming in was also high. So we're getting these new records all the time now. The magnetic field, all you can do with that is... I'd like to explain what the European Space Agency said to us in I think it was March 2010. They actually said there are now times where the Earth has no magnetic field. If you look into their old literature, They used to talk about this. Yeah, it's shocking, isn't it? They talked about the solar wind acting like a bulletproof vest, stopping galactic cosmic rays coming in. Okay, now they're talking about the Earth's atmosphere acting like a bulletproof vest. That's a huge difference. There are now times where the Earth's magnetic field literally collapses and it doesn't exist. When I read this, I just couldn't believe it. And it was just no announcement. I think I picked it up late, about 4 weeks afterwards. I just found it by accident. Just something on their website. And I thought, this is major news. This is major news. And people don't even appreciate it. So you've got the solar wind is flagging. There was a major announcement, and what NASA have been doing is putting announcements out like 2 weeks before Christmas, or like 3 days before the holidays at Christmas, sort of in a time when there's not going to be many people reading. And I actually specifically look now at these times because I know that they're sneaking out these announcements. Then by law they need to inform people, but they don't really want you to know. So they put these announcements out at times when they know that many people are busy and they're not going to be paying attention. That's interesting, isn't it? That's what the politicians do when they try to sneak through some last-minute laws tacked onto a bill, just, around Christmas Eve or something. Okay, so the solar wind is flagging, which means that there's lots of implications. We also have this this ribbon that they found in space, the Ibex ribbon, where they basically found that the solar system was actually being surrounded by energy that they didn't expect to be there. And they think it's an artifact. They think it's something to do with the galactic magnetic field, focusing on hydrogen particles, atoms out in the solar system. But it's something that they just didn't predict at all. And was the Ibex ribbon, was that some type of protective, maybe not membrane, but some protective field that was on the outer edge of our solar system? I actually believe it's part of special, they're called neutral particles. I feel that this is a specific type of energy that is now surrounding our solar system. And they're saying that the actual effect is like a distorted mirror effect. Because it's such a shock to these scientists to actually see this. these particular particles that seem to be arranged in a certain way. It looks like a ribbon, they're calling it. I would say it was almost like a snake. And I sort of link it to metaphysical beliefs. That this was actually going to happen about time. But it's an artifact. It's to do with the energy coming in from a new source. It's a different type of energy. It's creating a different type of effect out in space. But we have other things happening. We seem to be having like a huge cloud, an interstellar cloud that has come and that is now pressing on our solar system, and that the solar system seems to be shrinking. So when you've got the solar wind that's not as powerful as it was before, plus this energy coming from outside pressing in. So then that's going to create more of an issue with the galactic cosmic rays. There's nothing to stop them coming in. The solar wind, as I said, acted like a bulletproof vest and stopped some of this energy coming in. Well, it's coming in now. So we have major things taking place. These are not small things. These are major things. My concern, I think, is whether the heliosphere goes pop. And then, oh my God, if that happened, that would just be amazing.
So to pick up on some of those things you were talking about, is this the Oort cloud that the Russian scientists discovered in 1997?
No, the Oort cloud is basically asteroids and just sort of meteors that seem to hang around the solar system. Now that's theoretical as well. In my mind, I quite like the idea of the solar system being surrounded by these just millions or billions of rocks and things. But what we are seeing now is probably what they're calling an interstellar debris cloud. So there's energy coming from a certain point in space, and some of this energy is filtering through the protection, the sort of the heliopause. You've got to think in terms of the electric universe here, but basically there's a bubble in space, which is our solar system, and energy seems to be able to pass through this bubble. And I think that's because it's neutral particles. They can pass through this bubble, but we're also getting asteroids coming through as well. So they seem to be piercing this bubble as well. And they're dragging in this energy. So we are seeing a dramatic increase in the amount of asteroids as well. It's very complex, this. This is not an easy subject to talk about because there are so many things happening. But we are seeing a dramatic increase in comets. We're seeing a dramatic increase in asteroids. Even this week, we had another one that they saw. It took. They had 4 days' notice of this thing coming through.
A comet?
An asteroid, sorry. Oh, yeah. And we are now. It's just part of this interstellar debris cloud, they're calling it. And this has been going on for 10 years. It's just getting worse.
So it's getting worse because we're travelling into a denser region of the cloud where there's more rocks and more traffic.
Yes, traffic is a good way to put it. This cloud actually, incidentally, is coming from the direction of the galactic centre, which then makes you wonder about the messages coming from the metaphysical community and whether people just started to get certain impressions and just made things up that which are actually incorrect. But the energy... This cloud seems to become, and our scientists have been watching this for 30 years. They knew that something was coming, and the estimates were, anything between 30,000 years and 50,000 years. But they also knew that if there was anything in front of this major cloud, they couldn't see it. And I think we've got to the stage now where a cloudlet has arrived. And this is what we're now experiencing. It is changing the parameters in the solar system. It's changing, it's having an impact on the sun. That's why the sun's flaring more. That's why we're seeing different types of flares. Hydro flares now becoming more important on the sun. We're seeing like whole strips of the sun just peeling off and being flung into space.
Wow.
That's a new feature. I mean, we've seen these hydro flares before, but they seem to be becoming more common. So I believe that's to do because the sun is processing a slightly different type of energy. And I do have my view that a lot of this, they knew there was going to be an impact on the Earth, so they came up with this global warming scam, and that was basically to sort of make money from this. just say, oh, well, it's all being caused by us humans, and therefore we have to pay more taxes and things like that. I
guess it also gives people a believable paradigm that they can fix it, they're down here, it's all changing, but everything's sort of under control, and we can survive the changes. Where if it's something outside of the politicians and the scientists that's out in the heavens that we have no effect on, well, then it goes back to faith, doesn't it, and back to trust, and what can we do?
I feel that there is major implications to life on Earth being affected by the cosmos. And it's about controlling people, controlling how people think. Knowledge is power. And we have people who, they know how to use information to their advantage. And that's what we've basically been having. We've having this massive fight for truth. The whole global warming thing, I think, is a scam. And I think that, we have scientists who are telling us that the weather on Earth is directed by the stars. There's Henrik Spensmark, who I've talked about in my book. The trouble that he's had personally, just finding funding, but he's done a great job, because now that they're doing experiments at CERN with one of their very expensive particle accelerators, no one's it's getting to the stage now where it's very hard to sort of ignore the truth. But so basically, we have lots and lots of things taking place. It's not just one simple thing. There's lots of things taking. The sun is changing. There's arguments now about whether the surface temperature of the sun is increasing, whether that means it's no longer a yellow dwarf. Maybe it's a white dwarf now. There's all sorts of things taking place. There's behind the scenes. There are people who are sort of watching and thinking, you know what, I'm not sure anymore. I think maybe there's something, and there's lots of discussion. There's been, I have a new web page now, this interstellar cloud index, I call it, etheric cloud index, and there's a little section at the bottom about the rumours. We've had rumours coming from the astronomy community for quite some time. Now, whether these rumours are just to unsettle people or for what that's about, but there's definitely been talk about massive changes. And I feel, from my point of view, I believe that that this is all part of changes that we could time. This is what the precessional cycle was about, this 26,000-year cycle that they talk about. That we could, I believe that there's been ancient astronomers, because I believe that humans have been on this planet for millions of years. I don't believe that we're a recent phenomenon. I believe that there's evidence for societies that have come and gone before us, and I believe that some of those societies were probably more advanced than we were, and that they've been destroyed because of cosmic cataclysm. So I feel that we've had messages and warnings left for us that there's going to come a time when there'll be tremendous changes, and I feel that time is now. The energy that's coming from the sun and from galactic sources, because we're also getting blasted from deep space with these magnetars, that's another issue, it's literally driving up the energy of the planet. If you think of it, if you keep charging something like a battery, it's going to start humming, isn't it, after a while? And that's what we're seeing. We have evidence that the planet is literally being charged up like a battery. And all these earthquakes, the volcanic activity, is just where the levels of energy are just rising. And I try to document this. I try to point out to people. That's why I do my blog. And why I spend it's not just pie in the sky. We have the world's top scientists telling us that the energy balance has changed and that there's an influx of energy coming into our planet. It's not my opinion. I pick the top scientists in the world and I quote them because there's a good reason for doing that. That's what they spent 20, 30 or 40 years of their life doing. They know what they're talking about. There is an energy imbalance.
I guess as well as the scientists, Susan, the people of the Earth can also directly see that there's changes happening, even if they don't link the seismic activity and the weather changes. We have things like the auroras and the ionosphere, really heating up, and some spectacular auroral displays really across the planet. New cloud formations, as you document, all different types of cloud formations.
Noctilucent clouds as well, just started up again in the summer. I mean, that's another thing that's very recent. We never saw those in Europe before 2002. We knew they existed.
Could you define what they are, those type of clouds? What do they look like?
They're very, they're very high up on the edge of the atmosphere, basically on the edge of space. And they're normally backlit by the sun. So the sun has already gone down below the horizon, but they're being backlit because they're so high up. But these clouds are very strange because they are extremely dry, like dry ice. Very cold and very dry. But the scientists say that they think that the particles that they're actually forming these clouds are also metallic. And I think it's a type of dust, which giving it very strange properties because I believe that they're electrified. They're so charged, that's why you get this electric blue colour. But they think that they've got some kind of metal coating on these particles. It's an enigma as far as our scientists are concerned. But I think because of all this dust that's coming in from deep space, and it's a different type of dust as well, so it's creating these very strange effects, beautiful, these noctilucent clouds. But that is new, and they don't understand why these clouds that used to be confined to the poles are now moving down to mid-latitude, so we're seeing them in Europe. I mean, I sort of pay attention to people who I think we should pay attention to, like pilots. Pilots have said, we've never seen these clouds before, and yet they're in the skies for thousands of hours. They're in the sky, so they should know so for them to say we've never seen these things before, they are. It's a new phenomenon in Europe. There's
also very dramatic clouds, like, I guess the nickname for them is the UFO clouds, the ones that look like giant elliptical orbs in the sky, or punch hole clouds when there's that circle punched through the middle of them.
Oh my goodness.
There was that one over Russia last year or so that is, was hovering over Russia for a day or so. It was just amazing.
Oh yeah, but I talked about that in my presentation because I think there's something going on there, and I feel that we're getting beams of energy hitting the planet. We're moving through a completely different region of space with very strange properties, and I think we're actually getting fired on by these beams, and I think these same beams are causing the sinkholes.
Yes, they're very interesting, aren't they? Could you just tell us a bit about those? I mean, there's verified real sinkholes which are caused by water erosion from underneath the Earth, but these have a very different property. They're not really sinkholes at all, are they?
No, they look like they've been cut with a laser. And this is the point I try to point out to people. If it was a sinkhole caused by water, then you would have they wouldn't even be perfectly round. There'd be crumbling sides. It would be obvious that it was caused by water. But these sinkholes, they're like they've been cut by a laser. And there's even examples on ice as well, which is interesting, where it looks like something has stamped the ice. I'm highly suspicious, and there's no way that the authorities are going to acknowledge this. There's just no way they're going to say, oh yes, you're right.
These sinkholes are increasing across the planet, aren't they? I mean, as well as the sinkholes, we have things like the orb phenomena, where there's more of these sort of charged particles that are captured by digital cameras, but people sort of see orbs themselves as well.
Oh, now you're jumping onto a completely different subject now.
we're jumping around a bit because it's so interconnected, and there's so much that happens.
It's huge. In the metaphysical community, they talked about the lifting of the veil. But if you talk to a lot of people, they wouldn't. If you asked them to explain that, they couldn't tell you anything. It's just a catchphrase. Okay, now, what I've done is I believe that I've provided this scientific documentation to the reality that there is another form of life that lives on this planet that exists throughout the universe. We live in a universe that's 99.999% plasma, and I believe that the first form of life is like a plasma entity. And I think what we're seeing is that we are seeing, and they're interdimensional as well. That's a very important thing, is that they have properties, which means that we can sometimes see them and sometimes can't see them. We've had scientists since the 1980s that have been able to detect plasma coming into our atmosphere. They've been able to detect them in the infrared and in the ultraviolet. The Russians have been the most open about this and have shocked the British, because we've had a top secret UK Ministry of Defence report that was released in 2005, and one of the things that they said was they couldn't believe the Russians were so open about what they were telling the world. But anyway, so
what were the Russians saying?
They were saying about these things coming in and out, and they're talking about them, and providing physics, providing mathematics, descriptions of what they thought they were. I mean, if you think about, if plasma is such a big part of the universe, it's just subatomic particles that are charged. You know, if you have an atom that's been stripped off of the electrons are plasma, and the actual, just the protons, you know, the core of the atom, that's also, it's the stripping away of the separation of these particles that turns them into plasma, and they flow at different speeds depending on how electrified they are, how magnetized they are, and they have special properties. This is where the electric universe people really totally excel, because they can then explain the properties of the universe, but at the same time, I believe that we can explain that there's another form of life that is just in this state, the plasma state. We've had scientists that have spent 30 years looking at these reports of UFOs. There's major experiments that have been taking place, or research taking place at places like Hesdal and in Norway. The scientists are very open. There's no secrecy there. The information is available to the public. People just don't know about it. So we've had scientists around the world. The Russians are very open about their science. They've been studying these things. But I would like to say that in the sort of indigenous populations, and places like Australia, you're Australian, aren't you?
That's right.
I mean, you have now the Min lights. You know about the Min lights?
Yeah.
That in the backwaters, what do they call it? The very quiet places, not backwaters. What do you call it? When you have these sort of places that's just very away from the cities and things.
The bush.
There are, out in the bush. You have. Especially when you had the original settlers coming into Australia, they had to sort of get to grips with the fact that there was these huge balls of light that seemed to have consciousness, that seemed to be aware.
And this goes across all cultures, because we have the jack-o'-lanterns and the willow-wisps, and, you know, they've tried to explain it as like marsh gas or things, haven't they, previously?
Swamp gas, all this sort of rubbish. But people who have interactions with these things are aware that there's a consciousness there. Now, the difference with me is I'm saying that it's not just a ball of energy. It's a consciousness, it's an entity, it's an intelligent being. We have the examples of the crop circles that are being created by these balls of light. People have taken video of these balls of light, maybe a pair of them swirling around, and within 30 seconds you've got this amazing crop circle, which the mathematicians will tell you they provide pictorial depictions of very complex mathematics, even providing solutions to complex mathematics.
Susan, talking about those crop circles, a lot of the entities we're talking about here, which could create them, they do appear to congregate around certain areas. Maybe it's ley line activity or something, but you've got around Stonehenge, or you've got around the English sort of countryside in specific areas, and we're talking about the Australian bush as well. Do you think that's related to, energetic grids or something on the planet that they're drawn to?
I believe that it's to do with vortexes and portals, and I believe there's specific places on the planet where energy sort of concentrates, and it's in a geometrical pattern all over the planet. And so you get the orbs that they come in at these certain points, and they congregate at the energy points on the planet. I have a new strange theory because of some strange things that have been happening at airports. I am even thinking that people who decide where airports are going to go also use these same locations for communication purposes. I believe that communications will be better at a vortex. But this is why we're getting really strange reports now of so many orbs and UFOs being seen at airports because there's so many of them. I think last year, 2010, there was about 5 or 6 reports of airports being closed down because of a UFO hanging around. I think there was reports in Norway, the same thing. And there's reports in South America. There's certain airports that are constantly plagued by UFOs.
Wow.
And I think... I spend a lot of time. This is what I do. I don't do anything else because I think this is so important. I come across these reports and I just log them on my blog. And then I think, now, what's going on? What's going on? What is the common connection between... Now, the reason for this is I'm not going to be able to remember all the facts here, but... we're starting to see very high electric fields on the planet now, and I think at Denver Airport, I might have to go and search for this information, but we're seeing like windscreens cracking with the air is so charged now that we're getting these reports of windscreens cracking, and something like, I think there was 22 windscreens cracked on airplanes that were just sitting on the tarmac. So there's 22 windscreens cracked on 14 different airplanes in 90 minutes. This is a problem. We're seeing a lot of windscreens cracking in the air, but sitting on the tarmac. And I think that at certain points it gets very, very intense. The energy coming into the planet gets very intense. And I think if they've located airports at these vortexes because it was a good idea at one point for communications, it's now not such a great idea. It's I'm laughing now because I think it's quite funny that probably at the time when they made the decision it was okay.
Yeah. So Susan, let's look. All this energy is pouring into the planet Earth from stellar sources. What's happening to the Earth that we can verifiably see? I know that there's a lot of things happening in the ionosphere. You're mentioning these energy beings. I think they often call them sprites, which are really up top of the atmosphere there, up near the ionosphere.
Well, now you see, this is where you've got a problem. With the fact that we live in a plasma universe and we're now seeing more plasma on the planet, it's very difficult to know where the point is between something that has consciousness and something that doesn't have consciousness. Everything has, in the metaphysical world, everything has consciousness, but you wouldn't call a bolt of lightning a conscious being. Yeah?
Yeah.
So these sprites, I don't consider them in the same light as the UFOs.
Now, there's amazing photos on the internet you can see of the sprites. They sort of look a little bit like jellyfish or something, but they're like miles high in the sky and they're giant. It's almost like they're feeding off something in the ionosphere or way up in the sky there. But who knows how conscious they are.
Well, this is the zoo. Scientists are complaining now because this is a real issue. Because these things they're huge, and they appear for about sort of like 1,000th of a second, and you have to have like specialist photography to take pictures of them. Some of them look like squid, some of them look like jellyfish. I mean, they literally call them a zoo up there of these entities, and they just seem to have appeared from nowhere. But if you go back to the traditions, I believe the Mayan elders held a tradition of the arrival of the Titsi Mimi. You see, of these beings that appear at certain times. I think that they are electromagnetic manifestation, but they look so like creatures. They look like jellyfish. So it's a very difficult. For me, I don't consider them the same as the orbs and the UFOs.
It makes you think, though. It makes you think that, in a sense, because what we're seeing now with the implications of space weather is that we're embedded in a universal ecosystem, and there's regulations of energy, and there's probably organisms in there that when a little micro niche is created that's sustainable to an organism, it will come in and feed in that new niche, which seems to be what's happening with the changes on Earth.
From my research, looking at ancient mythology, I believe that there is information telling us that these beings come in, they are the gods, and that the gods are not interested in us, they're interested in the energy. They do feed off the energy. This is why I want to educate people, because I don't want people thinking that the planet's being invaded. But I also talk about this cosmic aquarium. I think that there are conscious beings, that they're coming in, they're flying in through the lattice. You've got all these currents in space where the energy's... this is a whole other subject now, but they're coming in onto the planet. And I don't... at this moment in time, we've just been told to expect them. I believe that these information, ancient mythology, that tells you at certain times when there's high energies on the planet, we attract a lot of beings, a lot of cosmic beings. And they're seeing a lot of these beings around volcanoes. We're seeing a lot of activity shifting around when there's earthquakes. You normally know there's going to be a big earthquake when you start seeing UFOs, lots and lots of UFOs. They get out. They know that there's a build-up of energies, and they will get out before there's a big bang, before the earthquake takes place. So it's a new understanding. It's a new understanding of our reality. Now, some people don't like this. UFologists, they want to believe in spaceships. They want to believe in little green men or little grey men and all this sort of nonsense. Okay, maybe there are a few of those, but I believe the vast majority of the strange things that people are seeing in the sky is another form of life. I'm calling it a shadow biosphere. And I'm not just making this up. I'm basing this on what the militaries are saying. We've had military people investigating these things for decades. They don't want to talk about the truth, but they just hint. It's just so shocking for people to realise that there's another form of life that's interdimensional. It's such a radical shift, but from the 1950s we had military officers writing books until a decision was made to stop them doing it. But the ufologists will tell you that the best information about UFOs was written in the 1950s. Wow. But we've had researchers ongoing. The stuff at Hesdarling is very important. They're saying that they've got a whole raft of equipment, state-of-the-art equipment. They've got SETI equipment as well, and they've got the 24-hour, 24/7 monitoring going on at Hesdarling. Some of the experiments that they've done, or some of the research they've done, it's not really an experiment, has proven that they can identify plasma in 85% of the cases. So what that actually means is that the properties equate to a plasma, but scientists don't want to burn all their bridges. So they'll just say it looks like it's a plasma, but they won't say 100% it is a plasma. But I think that is the work that's been done is significant. They will also tell you that these entities that they're picking up seem to have two types of plasma. And one of the things that you can notice when you're watching these things is that they're flying into our atmosphere, and when they get to a certain level, they drop their cloak. So they create like a cloak of light around themselves, like a shield around themselves to go out into space. But when you get down to a certain level on the Earth, you don't need that cloak. So these scientists have actually said they can see them dropping this cloak or creating this cloak. It's incredible. They are beings. The evidence is so clear, but can you get people to think? I don't know, because I have a real problem trying to find people who are actually interested in reality. We have our scientists doing this most amazing research and nobody knows about it. I think a lot of people are very stuck in the mindset. They've believed, all these stories about little grey men and, the traditional UFOs. Now, I believe some of these entities are beings, and they're shapeshifters. And I think that this is the bit that will probably frighten a few people, but I think some of them can just create, when they say they create this cloak, they can also create like a disguise. And I think that
you think they're amongst us? They've orchestrated things?
When it's something that looks like a spaceship, it might not, okay, a good example, I'll give you a good example. You get in some of these things that are definitely disguised themselves as aeroplanes. But if you're an aviation expert, you will know it's not a plane. And you'll find all these stories on, in the UFO community. You will find these stories. And I think that's because it's some entity that's created itself as a disguise. If you go back into the literature, you'll have ghost ships. Oh, my goodness. Even ghost cars. There's a story that I've read about 2 policemen coming across a car, but it wasn't a car, and that terrified the life out of them. So you've got to study. You don't just take what I say. Study. This is what I do. I read, and I integrate the information, and I think, what is the solution to this problem? If we have another form of life that is shapeshifter, then it could explain an awful lot of stuff, of old information that's passed on over hundreds of years. It could explain it. I want to understand my reality. I don't want to live completely in the dark for the rest of my life. I want to understand what's going on. And I think at a time like this, where it is getting absolutely crazy, it's really important to understand more of our reality, so that when all the aberrations concerned, we can say, oh, that's because of this. We've got to live in this crazy world. It is going to get crazy. And I feel that it's important for people to learn. I have lots of issues, because it's strange when I want to understand, and yet you come across so many people that don't want to understand.
Well, they're in denial, aren't they? It's like the 5 stages of grief, to let go of the paradigm they have. There's, denial, rage, acceptance, all those sort of levels. I think we're sort of cascading through those at the moment on planet Earth.
Well, what they're going to do, the orbs are not going to go away, and they don't care. So we're getting major sightings over London, over New York, over major cities in South America. Constant sightings of these entities. I've got to the point now where I'm bored lobbying the stuff, because I've seen so many reports. I've found the scientific research, I've found the papers, I've found the military documents. I know what the truth is. Now, okay, there's other people out there that want to know about the aliens. Well, that's a different thing. The 2-legged types, that's something different.
Yep.
But in terms of the vast majority of these strange lights in the sky, they are plasma entities, they are beings of light, the angels, the radar angels, that our military have been detecting since they invented radar. This is decades old. This is another big secret. They've known about the radar angels, but they're not a threat. What can they do about them? There's nothing they can do about them. These things come flying in and out, and they don't seem to care. And I've actually called them in my book the Earth Management Team, because I actually believe that some of them seem to work with the Earth. They are messengers. They seem to have a function.
This is good to bring a light side into it, because it could appear very dark to people. What we put out in this conversation already is that there's these forces beyond our control. They're basically either feeding on us, or they're interacting with us. They're coming here because of the great charge of energy that's happening on the planet. But in some of your other writings, you seem to balance it out quite well by also saying that there's something going on that's beyond us, but we are protected on a certain level, and that there's hopefully a positive in this, transformation, imminent transformation on Earth.
Well, it's very difficult. I'm just interested in the truth, and I believe there is a world, another world, that interacts with us. It's very difficult, because it depends on what the situation is. Because I know, deep down inside, I know there's nothing to fear. So it's difficult for me to talk to people. I just look at the evidence. There seems to be entities that seem to work with the planet. Now, I'm going to give you a good example of something. There is some guy, I think it was Slovakia, and there was a firework display, and he got his mobile phone and he captured one of these, and it was like a mobile video, so it was video. He captured a blue thing diving. There was a firework, it went off, and this blue thing dived into the remnants of the firework. Now I'm thinking to myself, is it feeding off the energy of the firework, or is it just cleaning up the chemicals of the firework? Because the thing just was hovering in the sky, the firework goes off, and it dives in. And I've just been joking to myself ever since I saw that, because I thought to myself, if that was some, alien or something, do you really think it would come from halfway across the universe just to sit there watching a firework display in Slovakia, of all places?
That's a very interesting shift with language, isn't it? It's like if they're not coming perhaps to feed, which is an idea which might bring up negative connotations, what if they're coming to clean? Or what if they're like antibodies, or they're rebalancing? If the whole universe is a sort of homeostatic entity, on some micro level down here on planet Earth, these entities are here to regulate and to balance things out.
Okay, I'll tell you what the metaphysical community have been told. The metaphysical community have been told that there is a changing of the guard taking place, and that entities that have been here for thousands of years are leaving and new ones are coming. That is exactly how you can describe what is taking place with the traffic. The traffic is two ways, and this is what the Russians were saying, that they've noticed an increase in this traffic. I believe that we're seeing these orbs flying in, and there are hundreds of reports now. I tried to log some of them on my website, but it's just too much. Where something flies in, it looks like a meteor, then it stops dead in the skies, and then it seems to wait for a little bit, and sometimes you see like a red beam, coming down and hitting into the Earth. And I think that's a message, it's information, it's interacting with the Earth. And then sometimes you literally see these things go plop, and they drop into the Earth. And I've seen this report time and time again. These are shocked, ordinary people. These are not metaphysical people with metaphysical understanding. They're ordinary people that see something that they think is like a plane on fire in the sky, and they come in, and they see this thing, it stops, it hovers, and then it just drops into the Earth. Now, I think these things are acting like neurons, like we have neurons in the brain. They're literally creating like a communication network within the planet. They seem to work with the Earth. And that's what's taking place. To me, it's absolutely obvious, because the metaphysical community have been told this. But if you talk to a lot of these metaphysical people, they don't think about anything. They just like the idea of hearing something new, but they don't think about it. They like the idea that they might be getting told a little bit of stuff. But I'll tell you this now. I think there are certain rules, and that they're not allowed... there is interaction between us and these other beings, but they are not allowed to influence the destiny of mankind. So I've found a lot of this information, you can find exactly the same information in the scientific community if you're prepared to look. Whereas a lot of people don't want to do that. They just like the idea of being told something they think no one knows about, when in fact that's not true. So I think that there is plenty of evidence that there's a lot taking place. I think some of these entities are literally free spirits. They can come and go. They're only here for the energy. I think there is traffic of some kind of changing of the guard taking place. I think some of them have functions. They seem to work with the Earth. I compare them to neurons in the brain. I think that they're holding information. They are somehow connected with the Earth. And I believe Earth is itself a conscious being, and that the Earth still needs help from the cosmos. There seems to be some kind of communication, and these entities, these plasma entities, seem to act as some kind of communication system with the rest of the cosmos. And the reason why, I never used to be like this, I never used to be into all this Mother Earth stuff, but when I started looking at space weather, one of the first things I discovered was that when the space weather started up, the Russians and the Americans both noticed that the polar cusps are now like magnetic funnels at the north and south poles, and it's like they can measure these, they're like vortexes at the north and south poles, but they call them the polar cusps. When space weather would start, they would actually open up. So, before the space weather thing really kicked off, this polar cusp were at 5 degrees. It was very tight. But when space weather started, they said that the polar crust actually opened up and was flapping around between 45 and 25 degrees. That's incredible. So the sun would blast off this energy, the polar crust would open to receive the energy, and then when the space weather was over, it closed back up again.
So this brings us to the whole idea of the poles, and this whole idea of maybe a pole shift. Like the poles are feeding off energy from the sun, and the sun is currently feeding lots of energy to the Earth. And we were talking before about the ambient energy and the build-up of energy on Earth. The Earth itself as a living organism is going through some type of maturation or evolution or upgrade, perhaps.
I've used the term upgrade. I talk about a planetary refresh and an upgrade. That's the type of language that I prefer to use about what's taking place. But in terms of poles, you have to be very careful, because we have the magnetic poles, and then you have people who talk about a pole shift, which is where they say that the landmass actually shifts, and that's very frightening to a lot of people. I don't believe we're going to see that. But we are definitely seeing a magnetic pole shift. And one of the things that's quite interesting is that the North Pole is not directly in line with the South Pole. They're actually both different. And it's like, in the metaphysical literature, they talk about the Earth's having a broken spine, because they're not 180 degrees from each other. So what's happening now is that the North magnetic pole is actually moving 10 times faster than the South magnetic pole. There was an alignment taking place, and in a metaphysical sense, what we're being told is that this is going to have an effect on consciousness, and they link this to male and female energies, but it's about polarities, really. It's about, up, down, left, right, up, down. It's a polarity, and this, we've had an imbalance of energies on this planet that has been reflected in the magnetic poles, and what we've been told is that is now being corrected or adjusted, and that will have a change on consciousness on the planet, which is actually very interesting from my point of view. It is considered to be a wild card. No one knows what the influence, what this is going to have. It's considered to be a wild card, the fact that the magnetic poles are shifting, and that it will directly affect humans on this planet. We are living in a time where we don't know what's going to happen. The impact of all these changes are so vast. But the message that I've understood is that it's not going to be total destruction on this planet. But I am obviously very concerned about some things, like all this radiation that's going up now. That is concern to me. And I feel it's like humans, we haven't really paid attention to the fact that there's massive changes taking place on the planet, and we're not planning for that. We've just got world controllers that just want to carry on like business as usual, when it's not possible to carry on like business as usual. So I am a little bit concerned about all this, Fukushima, and now we've got all this business going on in Nebraska, and all this business in Los Alamos now. When are humans going to wake up and get it? And this is and thing for me, I'm very disappointed in the metaphysical community, because they don't seem to want to understand reality. All these messages that have been given to humanity, it's like they're very happy with this having things in a very abstract. They don't like concrete reality or things being explained. There's too many people that like mystery, and I'm not into like things just being like a haze in my head and not understanding. And that's why I work so hard. I feel driven to learn, to research, to read, to integrate. I spend a lot of time just thinking, and I have noticed you get some funny looks from people, because they don't understand someone who actually enjoys thinking and understanding stuff. They just want to be in this zoned out, zombified mentality.
Well, I think people on Earth have been, they've been indoctrinated and sort of socially engineered down to a very narrow bandwidth So it can be... This is the thing, but at the same time we're talking about all this energy coming into planet Earth that's affecting our consciousness. We're also, either coincidentally or not, seeing revolutions happen, not just in the Middle East, but sort of, mini revolutions happening in consciousness and in people saying they've had enough of the old systems all across the Earth. And, is there a direct link, do you think, between, we've seen how different cosmic energies can affect consciousness, but do you think that's happening on planet Earth on the wide scale now?
Well, there's definitely things that we can point to that have been studied by researchers and are definitely agreed. There's something called the Flynn effect, where psychologists have measured over many decades now that there is an increasing intelligence. People are becoming more intelligent across the whole board, across the whole planet. Whatever markers you use, they've noticed that people are becoming more intelligent. And they say things like, maybe it's the food, or, maybe it's the education, but it's...
Where are these people, Susan? I'm not sure.
I know, but you've got to think of just how dumbed down people have been in the past. People couldn't read, even 100 years ago. So the indicators they're using to determine intelligence, things like, basic reading and comprehension and things like that? Yeah, I think, these are experts. I'm just picking up what they've discovered and integrating it into what I believe is taking place on the planet. But they say whatever markers you use, that people are more intelligent now. And that's why all the conspiracy theorists say, well, that's why they want to keep adding fluoride to the water and lithium now to the water to dump people back down again. Mm-hmm. When you think about the internet, the fact that people don't want to go to, sex sites. They actually go to conspiracy theory sites and talk.
Mm.
when you think about it, people are not using the internet for what the controllers want them to use the internet for.
Well, that's why they're now talking about kill switches for the internet, like in undemocratic countries. Yeah. People are
using it to educate themselves, and that's not quite what they want. So I'm being a bit facetious now, but I see that as cynical as I am about certain things, I do look at the work that other scientists have done, and I respect what they're saying. There are things that we can definitely say as markers. Like, for example, synesthesia. I didn't write about this in my book, even though I actually have my own synesthesia, but scientists over the last 30 or 40 years have noticed that there's this new phenomena of combined senses taking place. And this all started off with someone who, it was a neurologist, I think he was, to try and think of his name, Richard Saitovich. I can never pronounce this guy's name. Richard Saitovich, I think his name is called. And he wrote a book about someone he met who, when he was preparing a meal, he came in and said that the chicken's not quite ready yet. There's not enough pointy bits on the chicken. And that he measured heat as geometry. It's like he could feel like pointiness on the chicken.
Wow.
It's bizarre. And this neurologist said, what on earth is this about? So he started looking at this, and he estimated originally that 1 in a million people had this really strange, like combined senses, how the information was being processed in a totally different way to how people normally are. But over the decades, just the last 30 or 40 years, this has now gone from 1 in a million to 1 in, I think, 200 people now. They have like the colour synesthesia, where they recognise, for example, if you think of the week, they think of the different days of the week in terms of a colour, or they associate numbers with colour, or they associate sounds with colour. There's 63 different types of variations on this, and the psychologists and neurologists just can't believe this. It's absolutely incredible. We are changing so quickly. I have the smell one, so what that means is that someone sends me an email. Sometimes I can even pick up that someone is sending me an email through smell. I've had it where I've organised to have a phone appointment with somebody, and 15 minutes before they call me or I call them, I can detect this person. I very often when I'm talking to people on the phone, I pick things up, and I pick it up through smell.
Wow.
And that's a typical synesthesia. Like, for example, you used to have people who called themselves psychics that would see auras around or colours around people. That's nothing. That's just typical synesthesia. You can't see special anymore because so many people are developing this. And it's a wide variety of different things. It's how they process information, and our neurologists don't understand what becomes conscious and we see and what remains unconscious. There are a tremendous amount of research going into this, and they've done experiments where they can actually beam a picture into one of your eyes, and some people, even though it's been beamed into their eyes, people won't even see it.
Wow.
And they don't know what it is that information that's coming at us, how it becomes conscious, how we actually see it. That is still a mystery. And so now that the people's brains are definitely changing, and that we're processing information differently. And the whole synesthesia thing is just incredible. Artists say it's great because it gives them much more inspiration. They actually quite like the synesthesia.
Oh, yeah. So as well as the brain states, it's also like the energy that's coming in on planet Earth now is directly affecting our DNA, isn't it?
Yes, and now it's always been like this. This is one of the things that people really need to understand, is that our scientists thought everything was within the DNA. And that it was just like a blueprint that changed very, very slowly. Now scientists have realised that this is incorrect, and that there is some kind of environmental factor that is used to process DNA. So it's like a signal that's coming in externally. It's an electromagnetic signal, or I believe it's also an interdimensional signal that's coming in to people. And I think that our consciousness, our beliefs can affect how our DNA is processed, but I also believe that environment, and that we cannot change that. That is something that there is an element there of how our DNA is processed that is directly linked to the environment, and that cannot be touched by our scientists. And I think that's a great source of distress to them, quite frankly.
So what do you mean by that? That we can't change the fact that we're being bombarded by energy in our environment? Yeah,
exactly.
But you also mentioned,
and I think it's like that our consciousness. There's a part of our being that can agree to how that energy is used. And so I feel it's like we can give permission for growth, for evolution, or we can say no. But if we say no, then the DNA will not adapt to fit in. And this is why I think you have the issue of evolution or devolution. I think we are starting to see this already. Some people will become the new human, they'll become the mutants, and the mutants will become the new human, and that some people will not change, and they will and I think that they're going to die off naturally, of course, but the people who are born will be the new type of human. And I think that this is directly controlled by the environment. That's my personal...
So how do we interact with our own DNA consciously to then take advantage of the ambient energy in our environment that's there for us to take in if we choose to?
You know, this is a really difficult question, because I was involved with energy practitioners that were professing to help people to evolve. And I think you can do all sorts of certain things, but the evolution is not just... It's not just your human energy field, it's your thinking, it's your beliefs, it's your understanding, it's your relationship with the environment. it's like knowing who you are. It's like dealing with your issues. It's lots of things. It's very difficult because I've been involved with the metaphysical community, and I've seen a lot of bad stuff. I've seen the bad side as far as I'm concerned. So I'm a little bit more cynical than I should be, maybe. I don't know. But
some of your writings, you were quoting the Quiero tribe in Peru, which they basically don't take any entheogens into. They see directly the raw, energy of the universe, and they do a lot of initiation ceremonies, the Heart and Carpe, the Great Initiation, and the things to tune people in. But you were saying it's important that people. They say that it's important that people cleanse their energy field from the outside and go inward slowly.
I was amazed by that because I think that is actually correct, that they do this. So there is a role for understanding, but I think there's so much rubbish out there. I think that there's basic information that people should understand. There is the power of intent. I trained as an energy practitioner, and I had a few shocks because I would literally see the energy. And I don't like to tell people that I see things, but I do. It's the truth, so that there's no point hiding it. I have seen this energy on my hands. I've seen golden energy literally on my hands. I've seen white energy coming off my fingertips, and I've had quite a few experiences actually, but it's real. This is real. It's not just made up stuff. And some people have learned how to work with this energy. They literally bring it in with intent. They say, okay, we want this energy, this evolutionary energy, to help us evolve. And they literally work with their energy fields. But the problem with anything like this is that people get corrupted by their knowledge. This is the problem. Too much power tends to corrupt humans, and I don't know. It's difficult. This is a subject I have real difficulty with because I've seen the bad side. I've seen people misuse their powers. So, I believe that it's not just working with the human energy field. I think it's learning. It's having humility. It's wanting to open up. It's to deal with your issues, dealing with lots of different aspects about who you are as a person, and it covers many different subjects. It's not just about learning how to work with energies. I think that it's dealing with your attitudes, dealing with your issues, being truthful. I mean, I come across people who say they're spiritual, but then the very first thing they'll tell you is that they're a really good liar.
Weird.
They don't even see there's a contradiction there. But
No.
I mean, this is what I'm saying. It's very difficult.
Is there much science you've come across that looks at ways within which the DNA itself does interact with light or with energy that's around?
Oh, I don't retain this stuff. I mean, there is the Russians are very advanced with this. There are people who work who've spent decades looking at the photons that are emitted by the DNA. I'm trying to think, there's some stuff in my book about this, about how DNA could be programmed by light. There is experiments where they think that there's like an interdimensional component of DNA that they've been able to detect. There is a lot actually of science, but it's very it's not mainstream science, but there is science there that supports this view of, like they talk about the biological internet of DNA actually picking information up that seems to come from outside itself. There's science there, but it's not very well known to the general public. That's the only thing I can say, really. And it's because I'm not a biologist. I tend to be very I don't tend to spend a lot of time focusing on this subject, but we have the whole science of epigenetics now. It is the most what's the word for it? It's epigenetics is really the most sort of focused area, one of the most focused areas of science now. A lot of scientists are very getting on board on this because it's very important. They didn't understand they felt that DNA was solely in charge. There was nothing else. There was the DNA blueprint, and that was it. And they've now found that there's these epigenetic markers that actually influence DNA. And so the focus is now shifted, and it's now a very important part of biology, is to understand how these environmental factors. So, for example, they're saying that stress affects these epigenetic markers. You know, your beliefs, your issues affect how your DNA is processed. Well, the metaphysical community have been telling you that forever anyway. But
so thought, our thoughts affect our DNA.
Sorry, say that again.
Our thoughts affect our DNA.
Yes, basically.
You've also said
that is now not argued about in the scientific community. They now realise that is actually true, and that the DNA will process differently.
Wow.
This is quite amazing, but from my point of view, it's not just. I mean, also, of course, the astrologists will use this as evidence for their beliefs as well. I feel that what we need to understand is that humans are influenced by what is going on in the heavens. It's not just our local environment. We are also being influenced by the celestial environment. And I feel this very, very strongly. It seems to be that we've lost ancient knowledge. Even in the Middle Ages, there was a recognition that we were influenced. The flu, or influenza, actually originally came from the Latin, which meant influence of the stars. You know, you have viruses manufactured in the comet tail of Venus, and at certain points in the movement of Venus in relationship to our Earth, we are actually getting bombarded with viruses.
Well, this comes back to the whole idea that you mentioned, Susan, of space dust, and of what space dust really is, and where DNA, I guess, originally comes from.
Well, okay, I'm going to talk about the fact that we've had situations where we've had red rain, where you've had cells literally raining down on the planet and turning the rain red. And these are biological cells. There's some dispute about whether the cells actually had DNA in them, but we've had instances in recent times where biological biological cells have literally rained down on the planet and turned the rain red.
Wow.
Now this then links in with panspermia and the origins of life, going back to the plasma again. It's all connected. It's huge. It's a total paradigm shift in our understanding of how the universe runs. I believe that we are very influenced by what is going on in the celestial heavens, and this is why we need to understand that ancient astronomers realised this and left a lot of messages for us, warning us about this time, because they knew that there'd be a tremendous influence on humanity at a certain point in the cycle.
What is, in brief, I guess, what is going on in the heavens? Like this whole idea that we're aligning to galactic centre, and you've previously said that a lot of either transmissions, whether that's with energy or with space dust or the rocks and the Oort cloud and things, a lot of information, a lot of traffic seems to be coming from galactic centre. So with our alignment coming up with galactic centre, what does that mean, really?
I think that we've got this wrong. I think that the alignment with the galactic centre was more like it was a precessional marker, and that it was a sort of, at this point, it's like a certain point in time which we can use. This is the time for the changes. But in terms of energy just coming from the galactic centre, I think we've got this wrong. I think there's been a lot of misunderstanding, that we messed up the time marker with the energy marker. And I believe the energy is actually coming from a different place.
A universal source?
Yeah, I think that we are getting energy on this planet. Some of it's coming from deep space. We're having these magnetars The thing is, this is so convoluted, it's very difficult to explain.
The magnetars are documented, aren't they? They do exist. Science has documented them, and they release in like a second more than 100,000 years worth of the sun's energy in equation.
Yeah. When I discovered this, I was just blown away, absolutely. The magnetars are a type of neutron star which are related to pulsars, and they are the most magnetic thing in the universe. I mean, they are just incredible. When these things let rip, we're getting blasted by these energies, and it's coming from trillions of miles away. But this energy is so powerful that our ionosphere starts to resonate at the same frequency as the pulsations of these magnetars. And it's coming from trillions and trillions of miles away.
We're being entrained. The ionosphere is being entrained by this other celestial...
Yeah, and I was like, what? So, this is extremely complex. There's nothing straightforward in any of this. And it's like a celestial orchestration. That's the only way I can explain it. It's like an orchestration of energy with the cosmic rays, galactic cosmic rays. Energy's coming in from this interstellar cloud. We've got the magnetars going. It's just incredible what is taking place now.
Do you think that all this energy coming in from this orchestration of energy coming in is leading up to a collapse of the Earth's magnetic field? We mentioned right at the start how it's basically going down to zero, or it's... Basically, the magnetic field goes down, so all these energies can come in, and we can be bombarded, and we can receive them if we can choose how to do it. That's
a much better way to put it. I don't think it's going to go down to zero, but it might go down to 10%. That's what's happened in the past. We have evidence that the Earth's magnetic field went down to about 10%, and literally all these energies just poured onto the planet. And then we've had massive evolutionary change. We've had certain species dying off, but other species just flowering and seemingly totally unaffected by the changes. And so our scientists don't know why certain species die off and others flourish. So this is not something that's brand new. It's happened on this planet before. And it seems to be some kind of cosmic orchestration that's organised. But it's organised at a level that we don't understand, that is beyond our understanding as humans. And we have to learn to go with the flow, quite frankly. And this is the difference. This is why it's so... what's happening on the planet now. For example, go back to Fukushima, right? We had the Indonesian earthquake. Was that December 1996, was it? I'm trying to remember the date on that. I think it was 96. I can't quite remember. And we had this... I keep thinking maybe it was more than that. I can't remember the date. So many facts and figures in my head. But basically, we had this massive earthquake. Was it 9.2? 250,000 people were killed in that. At least 250,000 people were killed in that. And yet, Japan they don't even blink. They don't think, oh, maybe we should get rid of some of these nuclear power stations that are all sitting on the coast.
Well, I think they're in deep denial. They're in deep denial because they feel like they've got nowhere to go, but there's the huge media blackout on Japan and the ramifications happening at the moment. Yeah, but tsunami is a Japanese word. And this is the issue I feel, in that there's obviously massive changes taking place. There's tremendous denial about the earthquakes and the number of earthquakes over 6.0. We've got problems as well because they've changed the scale. It's not quite the same scale as it used to be, so it's very difficult to sort of compare data, that's because of these changes in the scale. But also, it's obvious to everybody that we are seeing once in 1,000-year earthquakes happening every other year now. What scientists used to say would only happen once in 1,000 years is happening quite frequently now. These huge, huge earthquakes. So, and we're not paying attention. It's like people just sort of just ignore it and carry on.
And
What do you think people should do, though? I mean, we can't continue to ignore it. There's going to this year probably, with the seemingly exponential increase in seismic activity and planetary upheaval caused by this ambient energy coming in. We're not going to be able to ignore it. So in your best metaphysical and scientific sort of amalgamation, what should we be doing on them? People who have a clue, who listen to this or read your articles or other information about space weather, number one, hopefully don't be in fear, but what can we do as individuals or as collectives to be aware of space weather and to maximise it for our advantage?
The first thing is this, getting rid of the grid. We've got to completely change the type of energy that we are utilising, and I believe we need to go down the free energy route. And I know this is going to cause a lot of problems because world controllers do not want that. They do not want people being able to generate energy in their garages with free energy devices. But we cannot make ourselves vulnerable to the current system. For example, I was talking about this before and we changed the subject. In 2009, a report came out in January that said that if we had a geomagnetic storm that was like the storm that happened in 1921, we can expect, this is in America, we can expect 350 transformers to be damaged, various levels of damage, and 130 million people without electricity. In a storm that could hit the planet and knock out this in 90 seconds.
Mm.
Now, with the replacement of the transformers, they're saying it would take 4 to 10 years to get back to where they were. 4 to 10, can you imagine that? No electricity for 4 to 10 years. Well, how can society cope with that? It is ridiculous. Yeah, but this is what they're saying. With this business of just switching off the grid, they're now playing Russian roulette with the sun. It is ridiculous. We've got to get rid of the grid. No, don't use a grid.
A centralised grid, yeah.
A centralised grid. Just don't all make the grid smaller, or do something different. You know, I know that there's engineers, electrical engineers, looking at these, and they're looking at devices that can act as, that can act to protect the transformers. That's another idea. But I feel that humans need to mature, and we need to recognise that we can literally tap the ether for energy, clean energy. We need to evolve. And we have world controllers that don't want that. That's the last thing they want. You know, all these issues with cars running off water, and you find that the inventors just die in mysterious circumstances. All this kind of nonsense that's been going on for the last 100 years. You know, any inventions that mean that people have more freedom and they're not as controlled, all those kinds of inventions are taken away. But I feel the current system is not going to work in the new environment. All this business with nuclear power, it's filthy, dirty energy, it's awful stuff. It has to be closely monitored. And in this kind of crazy, earth-changing environment, it's not going to work. Now, I don't know, how bad they're going to let things go, but I don't know, it's very difficult because you've got people who, that's all they know is control, control, control. And so it's very difficult, unless the sheep will wake up, it's going to stay like this.
So number one, then you're saying we need a change in consciousness.
Well, we have to elect new leaders that actually are not just self-interested and will just be bought out by the people with the power and control and the money. We need people who actually care about humanity and the destiny and humanity moving forward. We do need to elect leaders that are not just self-interested. I don't tend to sort of do the philosophical stuff or do the sort of, there's other people that do, but I feel that the grid is a big problem. And just changing things, just doing things differently, but this energy consumption, the way we do things now, polluting the planet, the fact that they can't find anywhere to put this nuclear waste, and it's the whole thing is just totally and utterly stupid. Somehow we just have to grow up, mature, and do something differently. And I think clean energy, tapping the ether, not relying on the grid. We don't want a situation where we have a huge geomagnetic storm and literally millions of people have no refrigeration. There's no heat in the houses because any gas that we'd be using would require electrical switches. We don't want a situation where there's hospitals with no power. We don't want situations... I mean, if it's water pumps, nothing's going to work without electricity. It's like trying to get people to engage brain and think, what's life going to be like? And this business of just taking a risk and hoping that we can beat the odds.
Well,
I don't think so.
I guess the number one opportunity we have is the fact that space weather, as you describe in some of your writings, is delivering evolutionary energies. And, they've quoted different metaphysical sort of sources saying that in order to initiate a new golden age, there's this life force of the Creator must descend into the midst. This is a quote from Robert Cox, I think, the pillar of celestial fire. This idea that there's an intelligence behind the universe or the cosmos and the energies coming in, this organic ecosystem that's bombarding us, and it's giving us this opportunity to embrace the energies to evolve.
You've picked some excellent quotes. Actually, I've been very impressed. Yes, that is yes. I when I talk about space weather, I'm not trying to frighten people, even though I have had the occasional email from people saying I'm trying to frighten. I'm not. I'm trying to get people to think. I'm trying to get people to wake up. Because there could come a day when you get up in the morning and you try to get something to work, or turn the light on or something, and nothing happens. I don't want there to be a situation where there's people who have absolutely no idea that this was coming or could even possibly come. This is the reality.
But in a way, we need that day for the light switch not to turn on, because we won't go out into the forest, out into nature, back to nature. We won't embrace what the world really is until we come out of our little technological box that we've created for ourselves. The society we have where people work and struggling. I mean, that is a society that has been created for the vast majority of humanity, and it's not really for our benefit. People need to decide, the majority needs to decide to do things differently, not to go along with the current system. And I'm not talking as a radical, I'm just talking as someone who just sees the common sense of it. I'm thinking in terms of the mass of humanity. We could do better on this planet. We don't need to have starvation. We don't need to have all the terrible things that are taking place on this planet. We just need to evolve and start doing things differently. And I personally feel that space weather is going to drive massive change, whether we like it or not. It's just whether we're going to cooperate. I think that really is the issue, is whether humanity as a whole decides to cooperate and do things differently. The first thing is the grid. I think the national power grids, the systems that we're currently using, are not going to work in this environment. We're literally just going to be playing Russian roulette with the sun. That's it. I don't think there's any other way to look at it. And I just feel that people need to wake up. For example, Fukushima, the week before the disaster happened, there was engineers, nuclear experts, actually saying, you know what, if there's a natural disaster, we've got a problem because these backups aren't really good enough. That was 1 week before. And they were trying to press the authorities just for a measly amount of money to actually get better backup systems. I mean, it's like, but there's been no enthusiasm. Now all of a sudden I'm sure there's lots of enthusiasm because they've seen what's going to happen because of what's happened in Fukushima. I feel that it's like people just need to wake up and say, what can we do that's different? How could we improve things? How could we create a better world? And do it. And I'm sorry, going down the removing carbon dioxide route
and trading carbon dioxide is not the answer. I'm sorry to say this to the Greens. It is not the answer. That is not where we should be going. It's fundamental. It's fundamental changes.
There's so much disinformation and, as you say, vested interests and control mechanisms in human culture. Though it seems to be that the only real hope for change is this evolution of consciousness, which is being catalysed by these energies coming in. You know, this celestial homeopathy, I think you call it in some of your writings.
Yes.
In a way, I guess there's a danger that your work could be taken by the metaphysical community or by people outside rigorous science, and it's seen as some type of cosmic saviour. Like the same thing, all the space weather, the celestial energies is forcing change upon us. There's the negative, but then there's also hopefully a positive. But then in that positive, we're back to faith again, aren't we?
Oh, I don't know. You said a lot there. Since I've had, it's been 5 years nearly since the book was published, and I haven't had a great deal of enthusiasm from the metaphysical community. I wrote this, the Planetary Challenges report, simply because I was appalled that the Obama administration were asking the metaphysical community, leaders in the metaphysical community, what the hell was going on, and they couldn't even give them a response. I'm sorry, there's no point in me trying to cover up my views. I was appalled that there wasn't something produced, some kind of document explaining what the metaphysical implications were of space weather and the changes taking place on the planet. Now I've been doing a lot of research into ancient astronomy, understanding of the importance of what was going on in the heavens, and the information that's been retained in ancient mythology. If people consider themselves to be spiritual, they should at least know some of this. That's my opinion anyway. So you're talking about people in the metaphysical community jumping on this bandwagon. Well, they haven't jumped so far. It's too real. And a lot of them are not interested in reality, and it's a terrible thing to say, but I haven't come across a lot of people interested in reality. And I don't know, because I'm not a diplomat. I'm not diplomatic. I just say what I feel, and I'm just amazed at the attitude I've received from people. I'm just amazed. There are some people who view you with suspicion if you are considered to be intellectual, because they don't think that's got anything to do with spirituality. They don't think using both sides of the brain is spiritual.
I guess you're between a rock and a hard place, aren't you, Susan? Like the left brain, right brain, metaphysical, scientific community. You sort of, because you're bridging the both, you're a threat to one half of the hemisphere at all times.
Yeah, and it's very lonely. It's very lonely. At the end of the day, we have to move forward as humanity has to move forward, and I don't see how we're going to do that if we just ignore the changes. And for a lot of people, that's what they seem to want to do. They just want to ignore it. And I think, how you can't ignore this. World controllers are not ignoring it. They're in complete panic. Even things like GPS that is used in lots and lots of applications. Even the military are thinking about giving up using GPS because it's not working properly. It's not very accurate anymore. That's how serious things are. The military thinking of giving up GPS. It's used for time-stamping financial transactions. It's used for drilling oil. They use the compasses and the directions and the locations. They use GPS, and it's now inaccurate because you cannot... because the ionosphere is so turbulent. They need to be able to work out exactly how many electrons are in the... They do this kind of approximation, and it used to work. It used to be fine, but things are so turbulent now that they can't get the signalling correct anymore.
Susan, what is it with the ionosphere? Because that's where this sort of almost mythical Deus Ex machine, a machine called the HARP device, which the blogosphere likes so much. But it has been verified there is such a thing called HARP that they have been using. We don't know exactly what they've been using it for. But I mean, this whole idea of perturbations in the ionosphere, or that we can control the weather through our machines, and the ionosphere seems to be a lot more than they actually think it is. It's not just, a band of radiation up in space. It's performing a very delicate function, isn't it? I believe it's the Earth's. It's a form of brain. I think it's or mind, mind or brain, or both. I started looking into this. It's so difficult because it seems to be, it's an area that scientists don't really understand very well, and they admit it. It seems to be, I think it's almost like a brain, it's almost like a mind. It's a mind sphere, the news sphere. I mean, some intellectuals have actually been, Pierre de Chardin, who talks about the news sphere. And that's why I was so fascinated when I discovered that the magnetars were entraining the ionosphere. And anyway, all I know is that our world is changing very, very quickly, and the world controllers thought they had everything under wraps, and it's literally the rug is being pulled from underneath them now. So whether they like it or not, change is being forced on this world. And I feel that, I don't know how serious things are going to get, I think they'll keep going until it's absolutely untenable. Even if you think about GPS, I mean, we've had stories of, sometimes it's really bad. We get the oil tankers crashing. We've had submarines, $2 billion submarines crashing on the rocks. Couldn't get the location right. I mean, sometimes I have to laugh, but it's not funny. I mean, when you think about an oil tanker crashing and all the oil spilling, we've the space weather causes erosion in pipelines, so you're having these frequent explosions, especially in Africa. Because the equatorial electric jet, which is we haven't even talked about that, but that's a flow of current around the Earth that causes erosion. And then also in the northern part, Alaska, you get lots of problems with space weather causing erosion, and they have to constantly watch these pipelines now. It's going to just get worse. So the way that we do business at the moment is not going to work. Space weather is not getting any better, it's getting worse. The Earth's magnetic field is getting weaker. There's more energies coming in, it's just going to get worse. So this is why I think that we need to fundamentally do things different. But when you've got such powerful vested interests, it's very difficult. But decisions have to be made. I guess what you're saying is we can't trash the planet. There's going to be a point where the planet's going to be inhabitable if we keep on like this. Everything's getting worse according to the old paradigm, which is unsustainable anyway. And the opportunity within these energy fluctuation coming in, you mentioned a lot in your writings that the Earth is starting to sparkle and shine as this magnetic energy comes in. This is transmutation, and then you feel that there's this tuning happening, which goes back to your book, Tuning the Diamonds, that perhaps our DNA, the energetic field of our DNA, is being tuned in by the energy itself. So we're all becoming diamonds. Well, this is another huge subject. The inspiration for the name of my book was just this came from my intuition, and it just felt so right. But then I've recently discovered that if you pass a magnetic field, if you pass a current through a nanotube, that energetic diamonds actually appear. And from the metaphysical people that I've met have come across who know about the diamonds, they say that that the diamonds are a holographic representation of our DNA, and that is scientifically looks like that is correct. There's a whole lot of metaphysical stuff, and I'm trying to substantiate that with
with science, this understanding of diamonds, of interdimensional energy that structured with geometry. And I believe that there is ancient knowledge that's been retained over thousands of years, where especially psychic people have been able to see into other dimensions and seen this geometry. That's why I'm very enthralled with the theory that I talk about in my book of multidimensional reality by Douglas Vogt, and he was also wrote with another author, I think is. But anyway, I feel it's very important because we do have a relationship with the environment, and it's this energy that's coming in that's multidimensional but also electromagnetic that does affect us. It's a scientific fact. I don't make anything up. In my book, I used about 750 references. I worked really hard, and I still have the occasional moron that comes along and thinks that I channeled my book. Maybe they're wondering, maybe I just had this dictated to me or something with all the references in the right place. I mean, I worked extremely hard pulling in information from world experts, and we are affected by geomagnetic storms. So I did my presentation in Holland, and I had an email sent to me from somebody who was a biologist, and he actually described himself as a skeptic, but due to their work, they know that the fetus is actually affected in the womb by solar flares and geomagnetic storms, and that they could actually pick the data out. It's proof, and they said as sceptical as they were saying that they could see it in the data. And so there were, and I was quite impressed with this. I thought this is absolutely great. The metaphysical community were told that there was great changes, and they were being told to protect their energy fields because of the energies around them. Not everything is good for you. It's just like a complete chaos. There is energies, old energies being released from the earth, very low frequency energies, and they are destructive. Then I came across some woman called, I think her name is Marsha Adams, a biologist, who about 30 years ago, she noticed when she was doing experiments that they just go completely chaotic. And she worked out that she was picking up earthquake precursor signals that were actually affecting her biological experiments. And now if you go on the internet, there are people, individuals that are now started, that have been picking up these signals. And now we've got the Russians making agreements with the British to actually have satellites in space that pick up these earthquake precursor signals now. But the metaphysical community was saying, by the way, folks, you're going to be affected because there's so much change is taking place on the planet. You will pick up these signals, and they're harmful. So I have a lot of stuff going on in my head. The integration of the science and the metaphysics is very important to me. Trying to understand our reality, trying to understand how we're going to be impacted, not just on a sort of personal level, not just on an energy level, but also how as humanity is going to survive in this chaotic, crazy environment. We've talked about a lot of different subjects. I think we've come up to 2 hours now. And we could just go on and on. It is massive, the changes taking place.
I guess in the Hindu belief, they call the world cycles or the age cycles the yugas, and in the Kali Yuga, in the last age, they say there's a celestial fire that will transform the earth, and that seems to match quite accurately what's happening at the moment with the space weather inundation.
Well, photographers have even taken pictures of this fire. I mean, it's incredible. I've seen a picture, this guy's quite famous from a meeting, where literally it's like they take one picture, there's nothing, it's just a normal picture, then the next picture, and it's literally fire. Just everywhere. They've, you know, and this is this most amazing thing now with the shift of energies and the use of digital cameras. We're picking up a lot of things that you can't see necessarily with the eye, which makes me really wonder about the authorities, because they've got this sophisticated, you know, technology. They've got satellites and they've got equipment that can actually see into the infrared and the ultraviolet. Makes you wonder what they've been seeing for decades that they don't want to talk about. You know, but now, because of this slight shift on the planet, it's like it's much easier for ordinary cheap equipment to pick up this, all sorts of discrepancies now taking place. I think we're living in a very exciting time, but I can see how some people would be frightened by what's happening, and it's massive. You could talk about different things, and I tend to talk about things on a sort of higher level because I do have a lot of information in my head, and I like to just sort of, I mean, you've picked some wonderful quotes, and I'm really glad that you've done that because I don't keep quotes in my head. I don't tend to keep quotes in my head. I keep like generalizations in my head, and I know where to go to look for information. You know, that's one of the reasons for my blog, is to keep a repository online of information, so people have got somewhere they can go and pick up about space weather. All the reports have been written, what's actually taking place, the new satellites in space, but also I then talk about the impact on people, DNA, how it affects people's emotions, how people are reacting very strangely, because one of the things in the metaphysical community that has been very important over the last few decades is sorting out your issues, and now now I can explain why. Because in this environment, if you think about your energy field as like a harp, you've got these strands all around you in the shape, you know, like a bar magnet. You've got these magnetic lines all around you. The environment literally twangs your energy field. And if that energy field is unbalanced, for some people, that twanging is a real issue. It can just send them completely crazy. And so you have people who react, and it's normally associated with emotional stuff. Their reactions are completely disproportionate to whatever's triggered them. And I feel that now with the chaos in the environment, that people will become much more unbalanced. And that's really one of the first areas that I started with all this, and with my research, was looking at the relationship between the human energy field and what was taking place. The other thing I found out in my research was that all the signals, all the electromagnetic signals, natural ones in the environment, are being amplified now with space weather. And so that's another thing, you see. Our brains are being triggered much more now by the signals coming at us. And the funny thing about it, they've done experiments, and you think about mobile phones. The signal on a mobile phone is something like 1 billion times stronger than the signals coming in from the Schumann resonance. And yet if you took this environmental signal away, humans would get sick really quick. Really quick. We can't cope without this natural signal coming in.
And the Schumann resonance is increasing, isn't it? It's an amplitude?
No, it's a very popular myth.
Right.
I don't believe that's what's taking place. I explain it in my book as being like a piano chord, because the Schumann resonance has this different frequencies, and it's like a piano chord you play on a piano, yeah? And that the lowest one, 7.8, there is slight variations on it, so it can go up to about 8.1 or something like that, but it's still there. I think there's one at 14 point something or other. I'd have to check this. But sometimes that second harmonic seems to be quite strong. If you go online, there's places where you can actually look at it, and that second harmonic sometimes is very strong, but there is a series of them. I believe that, like a lot of things in the metaphysical community, certain people get ideas, and then it gets all blown up out of proportion and all wrong, quite frankly. I feel that we have scientific experiments that indicate to us how we can actually tell, or what we should be looking for in terms of monitoring the changing frequencies on the planet. And I think the Schumann resonance is a misnomer. I think that because the Schumann resonance, all that measures is natural frequencies formed between the Earth and the bottom of the ionosphere. And that will only stay in a certain range because that is, well, it used to be static. Now that NASA's told us that the ionosphere has collapsed a bit, well, maybe things are slightly different now. But before, there was nothing you could do to change those parameters. There's just a few parameters and they don't change. And then what's more, the metaphysical community was told that changes were taking place between the ground and the top of the ionosphere. And I tried really hard to find scientific data telling us about these frequencies in the ionosphere, and I couldn't find anything. So I couldn't validate all these ideas where people have written books and talked about the frequencies on the planet. I even get emails now from people asking me about this. I've got no scientific data to suggest that those frequencies, the Schumann frequencies, have changed. But I think we have indications that there has been a tremendous shift on the planet, and that the vortexes, which we talked about before, they are the points where there's like energy concentrations, and that's held in a geometrical figuration around the planet, and I do believe that that has definitely changed. And we are seeing some very strange things taking place now. We're getting all these hummings. Have you heard about the humming sounds? The different places.
The Earth itself humming.
The Earth humming. Scientists have picked up new hums, 2 different types of new hums. I think what on earth's going on here in the last 10, 15 years. They're picking up these strange new, and then we're getting people talking about these strange humming noises that they're picking up. And I think that they're detecting this energy that's also coming in as sound as well. They're detecting new sounds. It's incredible what is taking place, and there's nothing goes on without a scientist, somebody somewhere is picking it up. Maybe no one knows what they're doing, but our environment is highly monitored, and if you're prepared to do the work like I am, you can start to see, you can start to find the evidence for really incredible changes taking place on this planet.
Definitely. Well, Susan, I'd just like to say thank you so much for being one of those people who has taken that time and done the hard work, and for bringing this valuable information, to the fore and to people, so we can then, integrate that ourselves. I think it's fantastic work that you have been doing.
Thank you very much. I sort of, sometimes I really wonder why I've done what I've done, because it's been so hard. But I feel it had to be done. But I feel I've taken huge risks with my own future and my own life to do this, but I just felt it needed to be done. I don't know what's going to happen, because I just think to myself, why has it been so hard for people to acknowledge the fact that it's not just etheric, invisible energy, that space weather, our scientists tell us that we can only detect 4% of the energy of the universe. They think 96% of it is hidden energy. And they need that 96% to get their theories to work. So when we're getting blasted with this energy coming from the sun, 96% of it we can't even detect.
Wow.
And yet, to explain that to people, it's like, I just don't get it. It's really strange, because it's almost like, the way I'd like to explain it is that people can learn the alphabet, okay? And then some people can learn to create words with that alphabet. Now, other people learn how to make sentences with that alphabet, and other people learn to create paragraphs, and they can write articles, and then some really clever people can learn how to do research papers and stuff with those letters. But a lot of people are at a very low level. They cannot integrate information enough to create the high-level stuff. And this is a real problem. And I feel like I'm a chicken and egg situation trying to explain this to people, because they can create maybe a few sentences, but they don't want to go to the next level of understanding. Do you understand what I'm trying to get at?
I do, yeah.
And I feel that I'm trying to bring concepts in that require people to stretch people to another level of understanding, and they don't want to be stretched. They don't want to move to this next level of understanding. I can't think of anything else. I can't understand, because I feel that I'm not a marketing person. I'm a researcher and a teacher. I have no interest in selling. I'm not, marketing. And it's very difficult for me, because I realise that some people just consider me to be a threat, because I'm giving people a new level of understanding of reality. And some people consider that to be a threat.
Well, Susan, so they might have tried to kill Galileo, but his information got out eventually.
Maybe we should stop talking, really, because I can go on. But I feel that what I've done is very important. But I've got to the stage now where I'm sick of being on my own. I feel that I need support, and I feel that I need people to recognise that this is important, that we can't carry on blind and unknowing and stuck in our old thinking. We need to change. Humanity needs to change, and that's going to happen when people start to pick up and understand. So I feel it's simple things, like, for example, when someone sees an orb in the sky, you should be able to go to your next door neighbour and they say, I've seen some funny light, and they say, yes, it's and give a short, brief explanation of what it is. Just in doing that, that is going to deal with the fear. That's going to give people some insight. It's going to give them some comfort. It's going to make a change in people's consciousness level. Those beings have always been there. The radar angels have always been there. You know what happens with the radar angels? As soon as we discovered that there was these entities flying around that we could detect on radar, the military realised there were no threats. So what they did was the radar systems just eradicated them off the screens. They said if something is moving around that is clearly not a plane, then it's probably one of these things, and we can just ignore it.
We can't ignore it any longer. Yeah. And
that's what they've been doing. And so even today they're still doing it. And there's a ufologist, Dr. David Clark, and he actually went to one of these installations, radar installations, and asked them this, and they said, oh yes, we just get the engineers to come along and get rid of them. Now that is crazy, because people are now seeing these things, and you can't get rid of them because people are seeing them. They've always been there. And there was a need for education, and that's where I'm at. And I don't know what else to say, really. I really don't know what else to say, because I feel that I've worked, I've shared my information, and it's got to the point now where I think, well, what else can I do?
Well, maybe you've done your bit, Susan. Maybe now it's time to let the information percolate and get out there and other people to run with it and disseminate it. And I think that's hopefully what we've done today in our chat. I think we probably will draw it to a close there, but thank you so much, because I really think it's incredibly valuable, the information you have pulled together for us to be aware of. And as you say, these times are so potent and so strategic, that we really do need to be aware of what we're embedded in and what's really going on, so we can take advantage of that, and so we can trust the universal process that's happening to help with our own awakening and our own evolution.
Thank you. I really appreciate being interviewed by you, actually, even though you had a hard time actually getting me to agree. But thank you very much, and I appreciate the quotes that you actually picked out. They were excellent quotes that you picked out, and I appreciate being able to talk about these things. So thank you. Thank you for the opportunity.